All right. Well, welcome. It is August 8th, 2024. My name is Paul Ortiz. I'm with uh, Dean Emeritus Lucinda Lavelli from the University of Florida College of Arts. And first
College
of
of
all,
the Arts, excuse me,
College of,
College of the Arts.
College of the Arts. Don't forget the is very critical. Lucinda, first of all, I want to thank you so much for agreeing to be interviewed. Your record at the University of Florida as an administrator, as an artist, as a teacher, is legendary. And you are a person who has done so much to make the University of Florida a top premier institution. So I'm very grateful for you agreeing to do the interview today. And I wonder if we could start, and this will be a little unconventional. You were sharing with me earlier, you were talking with Dawn a bit, who's your predecessor, we'll interview later on. You were talking about your respective careers, your accomplishments, but also kind of now you've had the chance to reflect on those with the passage of time. And maybe we could start there. Like, where are you at now in terms of thinking about your career, in higher education?
Well, let me tell you, my background is non-traditional. I started off being a freelance dancer choreographer. I took a job that I thought would be temporary in order to get health insurance, but I was there for many years. And from there, I've always been driven by my passion. And that word is so overused, but it is the correct word in this case, my passion for the arts. And why I left the position I was in, which was the director of the performing arts at Hathaway Brown School, a girls' private school, the only institution where I never experienced budget cuts and had control of a budget, was because I was in competition with chemistry and physics for time in the schedule. And I was very sick and tired of having to fight for time for the arts and having it being squeezed by the sciences or athletics. When I started there were 12 teams. When I left, there were 22. So at the end of the day, when I'd have rehearsals, that was gone. During the day, because physics required a lab, my teaching time was gone. So I went back to school and got a second master's degree in nonprofit management, an MNO, from Case Western Reserve. And there I thought I would have all the answers to where the money was for the arts. And that's when I learned, no, there is no money for the arts. It's not that you can't find it. So from there, I accepted a position at the University of Akron, which started budget cutting with my arrival. And after that, I moved to be the provost at the University of North Carolina School of the Arts, where we experienced budget cuts. It kind of was like walking on the top of a lake that was frozen, but it's springtime, it's melting, and you kept dropping through. So then I accepted the position as the dean of the College of the Arts, and at that time it was College of the Fine Arts or College of Fine Arts. And we started budget cutting there as well. And so my perspective is that the arts have to persevere regardless of the finances. And so I was well prepared for the draconian cuts that came my way, or came the way of all of UF. And in my first years there, I had to cut 1/3 of the budget. And I often said, I think I should quit and have the provost rehire me so I could get some new dean dollars, because all the dean dollars I received, and those are the dollars that you get when you're a dean, and usually they're there to help you make an impact. But in my case, it just went to all the cuts. So, but the thing that I was so surprised at, and I acquired this perspective over time at UF, that the arts were not held in high regard as other institutions, such as Florida State. And I actually did a paper on the arts and actually women at UF, and came to realize that at Florida State, they had 3 arts colleges and well-funded at Florida State in Tallahassee, whereas our university had only 1 arts college, historically underfunded, which is in the documentation from the founding dean, Joe Sabatella, which will be reiterated by Don McLaughlin, the next dean, and myself. And so we have a very large College of Engineering. We are the land-grant university, so the historically male disciplines were well-funded. And, it's in a way like critical race theory, but it's not having to do with race, it's having to do with gender and the arts. And so those two things were considered not consciously, but when decisions were being made at the budgetary level, it had to impact them. So the college was historically underfunded. When I got there, the faculty salaries were dismal. And, they were constantly, the administration, talking about excellence and excelling. But I kept saying, well, we're paid in the bottom quadrant of the situation. You can't ask those faculty to be operating at the top quadrant. And I will say that we pioneered faculty council, and every year I'd have the chair of faculty council and myself write a letter to the administration asking for equity raises. After about 4 years of that, I didn't do it anymore because the budget was in such bad shape. It was like a waste of energy. But I will say that before I left as dean, the provost remembered those letters and awarded me money that I could then address many, many salaries within the college to bring us up into a better situation. And I always felt that, as in any of my administration, the health and welfare of the students, faculty, and staff was my primary responsibility. So whether it was getting salaries, or in one institution, I had panic switches installed in the studios because you're vulnerable in dance. Anybody can walk in. And indeed, in one instance, somebody did walk in, and you needed those panic switches to help get help. We have kind of a society filled with unstable individuals, and you have to think defensively so that you are able to do your work without fear.
Exactly. Well, Lucinda, you talked about the situation where throughout your career, and you have worked in many different institutions, but there are certain similarities or continuities. One is that it seems that every institution that you walked into and began working, you had to deal with budget cuts. Some of this, one could say, well, maybe it was an economic downturn or recession, et cetera, but after a while, there's a pattern. Could you speak to why you think that is now, with the benefit of hindsight? I mean, let me preface this by saying I loved reading the Creative Campus position paper that you supplied us with to kind of review, because you made such a great argument throughout. The authors of that, the thought that you put into really emphasizing the role of the arts in making a top, university. But it just seems that those arguments didn't always, they're very logical, very student-centered, centering on what our students love to do. They love to be creative, right?
More importantly, it's important that that creative spark imbues all the other disciplines, because otherwise, what are you? It's the creativity that makes you stand out in journalism or engineering. And that was like a driving part of Creative Campus, which Don had started. And it was a national movement. People such as Nancy Cantor were one of the founders when she was at Syracuse University. And what I worked on consciously was how to integrate the arts across the campus, not have us siloed in our buildings, but teaching, of course, technique, but then connecting the creative energy across all the other colleges.
Yeah. Well, and another thing I'm curious about too is that, you and I were on the President Fox's goals task force, which was designed to help UF, move up the rankings, become a top 10 institution. And it just seems in our discussions around the table, very often people would talk about, how do you encourage like really creative, good people to come to a campus community? And it's so obvious that, you have to have that the arts and that intellectual, vibrant culture and the, performing arts, theater, music, everything is so critical. And yet at the same time at UF, it just seems that we perpetually are underfunding the arts. What is what is going on there? Because you mentioned FSU as a kind of a counterexample.
Yes. Well, I think there is a bias, and I think what's insidious about it is that it's unrecognized. And we had all these male traditions, we didn't have women as part of the student body, but at the time I was there, more than half of the student body became female. And women outnumber men getting graduate degrees and doctorates, but still they're not represented in those numbers in faculty hires. I think it's an American problem because you don't see disrespect for the arts at the same level in European countries or African countries or South America. I don't know, perhaps it's our Puritan origins, but now that we have so significant research showing the benefits of the arts, and in fact, I believe the college has a new grant from the NEA in building community, and it's through the collisions, the creative collisions. And in that regard, I started off and I created a committee called Sea Change, SEA, for Science, Engineering, and the Arts. And then that evolved into the more comprehensive Creative Campus Initiative. And it was through fun and, declaring clearly, I was also looking for money because I wasn't getting money for the arts, but I thought maybe if we collaborated, we would be able to get in on some grants together. And this seemed to be a national happening. It wasn't just in Florida or my brainchild. It was really exciting. I was like in the middle of the zeitgeist, and it was powerful and it was all over. And we got some money from the provost, and we were able to do special projects like the Creative Bee, which was focused on interdisciplinary work that couldn't be approached during the year because of the extremely regimented curriculum. And I would say also it was the roots of what we now have called Innovation Academy, which is interdisciplinary, because the universities weren't set up to be interdisciplinary. They were set up to be disciplinary. But then as we have evolved, we see that knowledge doesn't fit into a silo, and that the better ideas and the better thinkers are interdisciplinary. And we wanted the best for our students, and that came from this work. And certainly I had the support of the college dean of engineering, Cabby Abernathy, who understood that and wanted it for her students. And all across the different institutions, College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, believe it or not, entomology was a big collaborator. The library participated. And so each summer it was really exciting. And some of the different things that we did that were unique, we got a grant and worked with the city of Gainesville. And we brought, you might remember this, 22 sculptures that were situated both on the campus and in the city of Gainesville from the Seaward Sculpture Garden. Nothing like that had ever been done any place in the United States. I mean, maybe they brought one or two. We brought 22. And it was so special to walk around campus and see these figures from French expressionist paintings or downtown. I received an email from a woman who went by this one downtown sculpture, and she said it reminded her of her dead husband, and she went by it every day because of the impact it had on her. And I would see families taking pictures with the sculptures, and it enlivened the campus. Another artist I brought to campus was Xavier Cortada, and he has got a tremendous reputation. He's a Miami artist and works at the University of Miami. His background was law, and then he transitioned into art. He worked at, yes, CERN, for the nuclear, yeah.
Sorry.
His artwork is there. He's very much an environmental artist. He's received all kinds of recognition. And we had him on our campus working with College of Engineering students on a multi-layered project, because what we were trying to do is expand their thinking. Another artist we brought in was a kite artist. And they did a kite installation at the Harn, and then we worked with the engineering students. And it was really funny. The students, one of the activities they did, they were on the top level of the engineering building, and they were trying to build parachutes out of certain materials. And it was called the penny drop, because each of them had a penny attached to whatever they created. And they were trying to see what design kept the penny in the air longest. And, you know, they were working collaboratively and with each other, and engineers don't usually do that. So even just doing that task was so important and beneficial. And we did other things with poetry, and it was just really great. Because it was great, not because I said it was great, but because the students said it affected them profoundly at both an intellectual and emotional level.
Very cool. Lucinda, these are great examples of the importance of creativity, of the arts. Who are some other individuals or groups at UF that you really enjoyed working with, that you think really got it for their students, and maybe even at other institutions in addition to UF?
Well, we had a creative campus committee that received proposals from across the campus, and we would review them and distribute funds accordingly. And in the second or the third year, one proposal included using glitter. And I was like, this is the best we can do, a proposal that's going to be using glitter. We need to have some work here about how to even think, because glitter doesn't make something artistic or creative. So I would say working with the library was very exciting. For example, when they got the rapid prototype machines, and being able to incorporate that into some projects. And entomology used those machines and did some really unique activities with bugs. I learned a lot about bugs and have a lot of respect for bugs. Jumping spiders in particular was an area of research for one faculty member. I saw people think through things. Like there was one meeting I remember in particular where we had people from across the campus, and there were not many opportunities to work with colleagues across across colleges. It was almost like it was antimatter. Everything was pushing you back into your silo and away from others. But this one associate dean from pharmacy was like, well, wow, could we do a proposal where theater would work with us? Because one of our major problems is patients don't take their prescriptions correctly, either the right amount, the right time, or take them at all. And could we do something theatrically to help them abide by what's being prescribed and how it's being prescribed? And I found that really exciting, because yes, you can do that. You just have to think it up. We did some different things with College of Liberal Arts and Sciences as well. So the one thing I would say is that it was important. We also did a lot with College of Journalism and Storytelling. The dean had to buy in at some level to encourage faculty to participate. If you didn't have that support of leadership, it wasn't worth the faculty's time, which is very limited because of the responsibilities for their own teaching and research, to take on something like this, because it could seem not of value. It wouldn't advance their careers, and they couldn't risk putting time on it. But I will tell you, one of the other things that we did is each semester we had a creative campus collision, and it was hosted by one of the entities that made up the Arts and Humanities Creative Campus Committee. And I remember one of the ones that was held in the new chemistry building by class. And we always had artistic activities happening. For example, there would be music playing or an artist would talk on something. But the goal was to have the people there meet each other, because it was a cross-campus meeting place funded by the provost that was very nice. It had wine and cheese. And I remember a College of Law faculty member saying she never would have had that opportunity, and that it impacted how she taught because of the connections that she made through that convening. So we had one, and it would be at the Harn, would be at the Phillips Center, would be at the Natural History Museum. That one happened to be for class. And having just that little bit of opportunity to breathe and think and meet different ideas had such a big payoff. Another faculty member wrote me about how it impacted graduate student teaching as well. And we also brought in, through Don, who received a grant, we brought in an internationally known speaker on creativity, Sir Ken Robinson. And we did, so our focus was the power of the arts across the campus and the community. And that continues to today. I know that the Center for Arts and Medicine has been profoundly interested in integration. The new Center for Arts, Migration, and Entrepreneurship has also been very active in connecting the arts in the community and building community.
Lucinda, I'm gonna ask you a few questions that are going to be just so obvious, but I want to make sure that as people are listening and watching this, many years from now, they're going to understand the real importance and the centrality of the arts in higher education. Because as you're talking, I'm thinking about how there's gender aspects here. There's kind of structural aspects you mentioned, and UF is not alone in this, in the sense of originally being an all-male institution. There are just so many impediments to building a culture of the arts, but you managed to do it. And so, against tremendous odds. But can we take maybe a step backwards and, reading the Creative Campus narrative, I was really struck about, and this was very inspiring to see how you kept students at the center of the whole reasoning behind the Creative Campus. The students are front and center. They're not a sidebar. I've been very frustrated in recent years. A lot of our universities have kind of jumped on the AI bandwagon, which is great. I mean, obviously it's a part of our world, but the concern over the students seems to take second place to the technology. So can you talk about the impact of the arts on the students and why you see that as the arts as central to the student experience at UF and in higher ed generally? Hey, Lucinda, we were just talking about keeping students really at the center of your work over the arts, and talking about the impact on the students and the need to really think about, to rethink education in the context of, you talked about the workplace needs, but also I think at a much higher level, students' identities, their individuality, their creativity. Can you talk about the students in this?
Yes. Let me give you one story, and then I'll give you another story. The first one is, I had the opportunity to visit the Lawrence Livermore Lab in California, and I had been very taken with Stanford and Berkeley and their integration of the arts. And at the lab, I met with the director, and we had one of our students, grad students in residence there for a year. And she was looking at pigment at the molecular level. And she worked alongside the scientists, and things didn't work out, and she'd start again, and things didn't work out, and she started again. And he said he wished that there were more grant funding to integrate artists with scientists, because his scientists, when they had a failure, they were deflated. They couldn't pick themselves up. And they would watch her, and she'd get up and go forward. And it was such an important lesson for them to learn, not to be deflated with defeat, because that's getting you one step closer to success. And I think that's something that we're always teaching in the arts. You're never perfect. And we're always, I hate the word now, resilience, because we have to use it so often, but you are taught resilience in the arts, because maybe you get a bad review. Maybe you're constantly under criticism, not negative, but educational criticism. So you, as a student, have to learn to deal with that. And that's an incredibly transferable skill, because when you are a citizen, and hopefully you're already voting, but when you're a citizen and fully employed, the skills, whether you're in the arts or or not in the arts, those skills are going to help you succeed. So it's very wonderful when alums come back and see us and talk to us, and whether they're in sales, research, law, I mean, the arts prepare you. I can hardly think of any career it doesn't prepare you for. Medicine. And they say, well, this was an experience that really made a difference. And I also think you have an emotional connection that you don't get typically in other disciplines, an emotional connection with both your material and your teacher. And I think that is such a tremendous gift as well. And even if you're not a major and you get the opportunity to be in a class for non-majors, you're still going to see the benefits of the training.
Lucinda, you mentioned teaching quite a bit, and I wonder if we could talk about how you, especially as an administrator, created an environment where your faculty, staff, other people in instructional situations, with students. How do you create an environment where the faculty feel like they can really thrive and be creative and be successful?
Well, one thing I did was every semester I had asked faculty to invite me into their class. So I had a chance to see them teach, see the environment they were teaching in, see the students, how they were responding to material. And I think having that level of attention of the dean was important. I attended student productions, whether it was visual arts, music, dance, theater, marching band. So that was important to faculty to receive that recognition as well, that I thought what they did mattered. And I did think what they did mattered. We also, faculty in the beginning didn't believe that I was really trying to improve their salaries, because of course they thought I was sitting on a gold mine. That's pretty typical. But then when I was able to make things happen in their best interest, whether it was at UF or at University of North Carolina School of the Arts, I remember we had a faculty member who had the lower half of his body was paralyzed, and I was able to get him a decent wheelchair. And he forever thanked me for that. But I felt, wow, he needs a good wheelchair. So you have to be invested in your students, your staff, and your faculty. And that goes back to the health and safety that I was speaking about. So, for example, we had terrible ventilation in one of our art buildings, and one of our faculty members had silicosis in her lungs from breathing unfiltered air for many years. And so you have to stand up and fight for it. And we got it. It cost a lot of money, but that's what money is for, to make something safe. I had a problem with the marching band field, and we didn't have a permanent one at the time. And the band field we were using had sprinklers, but the group in charge, rec facilities, wouldn't turn the sprinklers on. So our students were getting upper respiratory infections from all the dust, and then also the field wasn't level and they were getting some ankle injuries. So I brought it to the administration's attention. I mean, we have 22 fields at UF, none of them in the College of the Arts, but there's this word I kept saying that we couldn't forget, which was share. What can you share with us? Now, I'm not expecting to be shared a football field, of course, but there's got to be something we would do better. And nothing was happening. So one day I went into the provost's office and I said, either you solve this problem or you're going to have a sit-down marching band, because I'm not letting them march anymore in these unsafe conditions. And it worked. I mean, you never want to pull that card until you're absolutely at the end of your rope, which I was. And I don't think the provost had ever seen me like that before or since, but I was furious that the health and safety of the students weren't paramount and that everybody wasn't scrambling at UF to make it better. So, and as you know, the last year I was there, we got a permanent marching band field with artificial turf. And the location, unfortunately, was the lowest spot on campus, so we had to spend extra money on drainage, but we've got it and it's something to be proud of.
Definitely. Listen, I wonder if you in your timeline of the history of arts at UF, you talk about there's certain landmarks, and I was impressed that some of them refer to particular faculty who arrived, or even artists and residents, people who again are interacting with the students and the entire community. I wonder if you could, without any kind of value judgments, maybe think about, 2 or 3 kind of marquee, faculty who came in and really made a difference for the students and for the building of arts.
Yeah, I can think of 2. One was a theater major who was working in professional theater as a producer in New York, and his name is John Pinkard. And I mentioned the Tilted Windmills productions, and I had always believed I thought universities were the perfect ground for experimenting with material or rehearsing material before taking it to Broadway. And so we did that through the directorship of Jerry Dickey, who is the director of the School of Theater and Dance. And John would bring in material from New York, workshop it on our students, have a production, and then take it back to New York. And I felt that was a unique opportunity for our students to engage at that level, make those kind of professional contacts, and felt really pleased that we were able to make that happen. A second one was one of our alums is a composer, and her name is Stella Sung. And she wrote an opera called The Red Silk Thread, and it was about Marco Polo. And we used rear screen projectors, which was exciting technology to use. Our students, both in the choral program and the instrumental program, got to prepare material that was new, original work. And so I felt that was another unique experience for our students to be exposed to integrate with, to have the live composer there to talk with, to understand how you put together a new work. I felt that was quite successful.
Would have been another thing you mentioned, Lucinda, in the timeline, and you also referenced this in the Creative Campus narrative, would have been some of the real exciting maybe artistic installations or performances that have made an impact on the campus and the broader community? It could be an opening, it could be a performance, it could be.
I can think of two things. The first, we did a staged version of Phantom of the Opera. And we had a pipe organ, the Anderson pipe organ, and it was in not very good shape. And the provost gave me half of the money for renovation, and the college came up with the other half. And we did this, we had talent comes and goes as the students graduate, but we had the perfect voice for the Phantom. We had the perfect voice for Christine. All the talent fell into place. We got the money for the pipe organ, and we performed to sold out houses at University Auditorium. And to be a student, to be in that production, to have that experience was singular. And community members came up to us and said, "Oh my God, you know, this was as good as being on Broadway. The voices were incredible." And so that was a highlight for me. And then another highlight is our annual holiday concert, the winter choral concert or the holiday concert. And we have all these students performing in the orchestra and singing, and the production is open to all the campus and the community, and the president helps fund it. And I think that's another really exciting production that both the campus and the community look forward to, as well as the performers, because they get to learn all different kinds of music depending on the theme of the program. The instrumentalists also get an opportunity to play wonderful music. And I think it's the community coming together. So that's for me one of the highlights also.
Well, if we could continue with that theme of community, we use the term quite a bit these days, but I'm not sure that a lot of folks really understand all of what we're talking about. What role did community play in the way you worked as an administrator? You were able to bring a lot of people together, a lot of different constituencies. What was your vision of kind of community within the arts?
Seldom did I get a no if I asked for help. The one exception, of course, being what I had to do about getting a field, because of course the sports people weren't going to help and rec sports wasn't going to help, but eventually they found their way to help. I guess I saw UF as a treasure chest, and I had to find the right ways to pull out the jewels that I wanted to work with that could make something greater than what I could do alone. Maybe I have a facility, or maybe I have the students, but do I have something that's going to make the engine go? And it wasn't that I was thinking alone. I had different committees or different opportunities to bring people together to talk and think. And it was making time in the schedule so that you could have an opportunity to talk and think. I mean, you know, you see all those billions of research dollars coming in, and you read about how great our faculty is, our researchers are, but then think, is there something more we could do?
Yeah, exactly. Well, you had, I wonder, Lucinda, we could take oh, go ahead.
Let me add one other thing.
Yeah.
Wynn Phillips, in his different roles, was also supportive of the arts, and he put myself on the research committee. Well, by having the arts dean on the research committee, it changes how people view the college and what it can bring to the table. And another example of that was a researcher by the name of Ben Dunn. who ran the Howard Hughes Medical Institute grant as long as we had it. And we did something that wasn't done anyplace else, that was integrating the arts and sciences. And then we had a day showcasing the research and the art that came from these students working together interdisciplinarily. And I'll say that was certainly another high point. But it was, you have to have, if you extend your hand in friendship, somebody's got to be at the other end to shake it. You have to have somebody else who can have some vision with you, like Ben Dunn did, or Wynne Phillips, or Joe Glover, the provost.
I really enjoyed working with Wynne Phillips over the years, and the last thing we worked together on, and I was thinking about this, Lucinda, as I was reading the narratives that you gave us. We worked together on the Presidential Task Force on African and Native American Histories at UF, and that was quite an endeavor. And Wynne was always very good at saying, you know, look, I'm an engineer. You have to explain this history stuff to me, you know. And he was always a pleasure to work with. And I wonder if you could share with me some of the people who were really influential earlier in your career. You know, you mentioned, you know, some of the transitions and some of the leadership positions you had earlier, but I wonder if we could go back and if with the benefit of hindsight, thinking about some of the people who are really influential on your development, you know, as an arts leader, if you will. And these could be people who, you know, maybe when you were, you know, studying, you know, in school, or even earlier in your career.
I would say two of my faculty as a graduate student left an impact. And I'll tell you that in their honor, I've started, and I picked this idea up from UF, a travel award in their name for graduate students. There's a woman at the University of Florida. She was here, a very profound woman. Her name was Madeline Lockhart. And when she was at UF, she was both the dean of the graduate school and international center. And she was not treated well by UF to begin with. They hired her husband and brought her in on an annual contract. And after several years of that, she asked the provost, if I'm good enough to be rehired, why can't I have a permanent contract? Well, they didn't want to hire her because they didn't want to pay benefits. And they used that disgusting phrase, well, if we've got the cow, meaning her husband, why do we want the milk or whatever? So she left UF and eventually came back, but she knew how to put dollars in the right place to make an impact. So I had felt these two faculty members, Catherine Karapides and Kelly Holt, had such integrity that it definitely inspired me. And Kelly felt he saw administrative talent in me as a graduate student and nurtured that. And then one thing I always tell students is get as many experiences as you can, serve on as many committees as you can. And when I was an independent dancer, and then through my time living in Cleveland, I worked with an organization called Dance Cleveland. And they also were a group of dancers who banded together to make dance happen in Cleveland, both as in workshops and in performances. And they supported my administrative initiatives. And I was the president of that organization for a while, and it's 63 years old now. It was founded by 5 female dancers. So I've always had role models of strong women. And I didn't think it was any other way, but I know one of the female deans, when I was retiring, said to me, "Oh, I respected you so much." And I thought, "You respected me? What did I do?" And she said, "Well, you would speak your mind." Well, I didn't know that was a unique characteristic.
Well, isn't it interesting, Lucinda, that it's often people in the arts and the humanities are expected to do that, right? To speak our minds and to kind of put ourselves out there, right? Which you certainly were always noted for speaking your mind, and it's very, and I'm very grateful for that, by the way, as a colleague, that you took those roles and when other people didn't necessarily feel like they could do that, they didn't necessarily maybe feel like they could speak out. I wonder if we could take this opportunity maybe to even think of the arts beyond the University of Florida. And if we think about, you had mentioned earlier, you were encouraging us to think a bit comparatively, to Africa or Europe, Latin America, other parts. And what now do you see? Well, let me ask, I'm going to ask a more kind of limited question and maybe ask a broader question as a follow-up. But what can universities and colleges do to promote the type of creative thinking that you're trying to get us to do on campus? But obviously, it's only of limited utility if we only do it on our respective campuses. So I guess the question I'm asking, I apologize, it's kind of cumbersome lead up here, but what role can universities and colleges play in not just promoting the arts, because obviously universities aren't the only place that arts happen, but even facilitating or being part of a much greater sense of the arts?
This may not be an exact answer, but one of the other movements across America right now is in design. And the first D school was at Stanford. And one of the main directors of a company called IDO is from UF. And what I think, and the concept of design is very much what choreography is about, where you look at a problem and you examine it from every different angle you can think of. And I think what we want to do in education, whether it's K-12 or higher education, is provide ways for students to think and problem solve. And I think the best way to, I mean, some of that happens outside of the curriculum, but I think it would be great, or a way to approach this is if there were a course, and I know courses now are springing up in civility, so that students aren't afraid to talk. How can you disagree without being jumped on? But in a similar fashion, if there is an introductory course that lays the foundation for problem solving, asking questions, being inquisitive, and an important part of that is it has to be engaging. It has to be fun. It can't put people to sleep. So people being students. So it's constantly got to be reinvented because the students are different. So it's somehow reaching in there and using design or choreographic concepts that lay the foundation for them for all the rest of their coursework, so that there is respect for things outside of their discipline. I remember at this one presentation we were doing, and it was an interactive exercise, and I was talking with an engineering student, and he was explaining to me the low level of regard he had for the arts. I didn't tell him I was the dean of the college. But he was like, "You're kidding. You want me to interact with arts that, they're like second-class citizens." I was like, "Okay, let me talk with you later, all right?" So that kind of thinking is prevalent, and we have to figure out how to explode it, because they're missing out on so much if you aren't even going to give it a chance.
Exactly. Well, what has been, Lucinda, is you think also about your experiences in the arts and higher education. What are some of the biggest changes you've seen over time? Uh, Both, I guess, at UF, but even if you want to discuss a broader context.
Well, the arts are part of society. And I'll tell you, when I was the dean and things were just starting to become volatile, I'd never had this happen before, but I had a parent screaming at an assistant outside of my office, and she was screaming so loudly over the phone. I said, "Let me talk to this woman." And we taught a course, a general studies course, and she was outraged at some of the concepts that were being presented, wanted me to fire the faculty member, and also was threatening the faculty member. And this was the very beginning of this situation in higher education. And so the arts aren't immune from it, but about how do you present ideas. And the idea she was screaming about had to do with, we used to talk about America either as a mosaic or what was something else, a mosaic or
Like a
something else.
melting pot.
Melting pot, that's it, mosaic or melting pot. And now we were talking about a salad. And the parent was insane about this. And this had gone through 3 or 4 years of discussion on a committee on how to use terminology for this committee, had been discussed nationally as well. And so having that kind of reaction, you can't help but have a ripple effect. And it would, you become protective. You are feeling attacked. It's a severe chilling doesn't even cover it, freezing effect. And it affects, what do you think about if you're going to choreograph? What are you going to, when you select your plays, how do you work with your students so they understand the selection process and how it contributes to their education? How do you talk about subjects that you're going to paint or craft through ceramics or sculpture? So everything took on a different level of discussion and analysis. And then you're having students come in from so many different perspectives, some highly developed aesthetics to some that have practically no aesthetic understanding. And how do you bring them to a level of safety in the studio or classroom where you're exploring these ideas together? Because faculty aren't filled with answers. Faculty are filled with questions.
Exactly.
So that's the biggest change I saw, because the environment changed.
Yeah.
I actually had a workshop put in place with the Phoenix, well, Mrs. Phoenix, I forget her name now, River Phoenix's mom, has a center in Gainesville to give faculty tools for dealing with conflict and conflict resolution, because this wasn't in our background, but we had to learn how to manage these things for for our students to have an environment in which they could learn.
Well, dovetailing on that, Lucinda, and I think that I've taken up a lot of your time today, so I want to think about maybe just asking you a couple more questions
Sure.
and beginning to kind of wrap up here. But
Excuse me, I remembered her first name, Hart Phoenix, I believe is the mother's name.
oh, Hartford's. Okay, yeah, I've heard about I've heard they have great workshops.
Yes.
Yes, excellent.
So that goes back to my always trying to provide faculty with the tools, the skills, the resources that they need to be successful.
Well, excellent. And that kind of brought to mind this issue of really training faculty to be exceptional arts instructors. As you know, in graduate school, often teaching is kind of almost like the missing link. You're lucky if you have advisors who really emphasize teaching. So how does one prepare, a graduate student who's planning to go into teaching in the arts? How does one prepare them for all of these challenges and remaining, student focused, without getting distracted by everything that's going on outside?
Well, students most often get opportunities of student teaching and it's supervised. And I think that's about the best you can do.
Mm-hmm.
And then leave them with the idea that learning never ends. Because as we talked about earlier, the students that you're teaching are constantly changing and you have to figure out ways to adapt.
Exactly. Well, thank you for that. And are there other themes or topics, Lucinda, that we haven't talked about that you want to touch upon? And again, we can always follow up, down the road later on. But for now, are there ideas or thoughts you want to kind of get out there before we conclude the interview?
I think I really addressed it in the beginning that people in the arts have committed their lives to their art and they are driven to share it. And most often there aren't the resources either in the community or the community writ large across the United States. And so we're always looking for new ways to stretch a nickel to a dime. And I think as we speak now, we have just experienced a really horrific loss. The governor today is a man named Ron DeSantis. He cut all the arts funding from the state budget. He said it was because he was influenced by 2 fringe festivals that he felt were offensive. Of course, he's never been there. They're family-friendly presentations. His action decimated from the north to the south arts organizations as well as universities, because the universities applied for funding too. And so this is an example of profound ignorance, because even if you didn't believe in the arts, arts generate money. Every dollar spent generates $9 more. And in Florida, based in tourism, that you would damage one of the economic engines, even if you don't understand the arts, even if you're blind and deaf. Are you also dumb that you would threaten the livelihood of millions of people for what? So I guess I want to say it's 2024, and the challenge to the arts is as real as it's ever been in the history of the university and the United States.
Well, I think your interview and the series of interviews with College of the Arts leaders is really going to help, remind and kind of recenter this discussion about, what is the role of higher education in a small d democratic society? And you made the wonderful case that the arts have to be seen as central to that. We have to get out of our silos. We have to, get back to the students, back to the classroom in its many different contexts. So, Lucinda Lavelli, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to be with us. And
Well, I want to say thank you for thinking it's important enough.
well, yes, of course. Oh my gosh. I mean, I mean, and being a colleague in an allied discipline, which is also, we also have to kind of justify ourselves in the humanities, right? All the time. I mean, your struggles and successes are unique, but there's a connection between arts and humanities, I think, and I'm teaching right now. I mentioned Toni Morrison to different groups of school teachers, and they're talking with me about how one group told me, we have to actually explain to our administrators. This is a high school, K through 12 district. We have to explain to our administrators why one should read Toni Morrison, and it's like, on the one hand, you think, "Oh my gosh, that why?" But on the other hand, you think, "Well, that's good. It's good that we can clarify why what we do matters." And so,
Well, let me say in that regard, one of the things I put together was that Arts and Humanities Committee, because the leaders of those units, Harn, Natural History, Phillips Center, class, library, and the arts, there wasn't any occasion for them to come together. And I had envisioned them working the same way that the the health science group, veterinary medicine, nursing, that group. I felt that combined together, we had more power and a bigger voice than each of us individually, and that there might be funding, we could find funding for opportunities where we could come together and work, that we couldn't do it alone. So when you talk about the challenges of the humanities, that's why we are all there together, because it's kind of the same fight against ignorance.
yeah, exactly.